Your Honor, I'm not here to argue that any old podcast should be allowed to talk about video games. I'm here to argue that this podcast should be allowed to talk about video games. Objection! Welcome to Triple Click, where we bring the games to you. Today we're talking about our beloved Ace Attorney series, which has a new trilogy of games re-releasing on modern platforms this week. There's a lot to talk about, and the judge is going to shut us down any minute, so let's get into it. I'm Kirk Hamilton.
I'm Maddy Myers.
And I'm Jason Schreier. Hello.
Hello.
Hey, hello.
Hello.
Welcome one and all to another Triple Click.
Welcome one and all to another episode of
we
Triple Click.
We made it back every week. We somehow get here again.
Despite the odds.
Coming through to record for all of you against the odds, despite any further weather complications or recovery complications that may be happening in Portland. We're making it happen.
Fine. Everything's great there.
Everything's great. And the reason it's great is because Triple Click is listeners supported. Or at least that's the reason Triple Click is great. And we appreciate all of your support. Of course, you can become a member and support our show at MaximumFun.org/join. There's a link for that in the show notes. And if you join, you get bonus episodes every month that we put out. And our next one is going to be out next week. It's going to be all of our One's More Thing, all of our picks for our favorite non-game stuff from last year. So there'll be a lot of discussion of that sort of stuff. And I think just kind of a loose discussion of whatever we want to talk about. It's going to be great. So that's MaximumFun.org/join. Become a member, support our show. We love all of our members. Thank you all so much. All right, Jason Schreier, what are we talking about this week?
Today we are talking about Ace Attorney, aka Phoenix Wright, the wonderful series about being a lawyer. So this week marks the release of the Apollo Justice Collection, which is a trilogy of games in the Ace Attorney series. And to zoom out for a second, there are 6 main games in the Ace Attorney series. The first 3 were released as a compilation, a remastered compilation for like Switch and PC and all the consoles in 2019. And this is the second half of that compilation, the next 3 games that are now coming to all of those same modern consoles. So now you can get all 6 main Ace Attorney games on your Switch.
And
they're
you
pretty
should.
Cool. You should. They're pretty cool. Pretty good. All right, episode. All right, now for one more thing.
Good at.
Yeah, they're pretty good today. We're going to talk about what makes the series work, why people love it so much, the kind of the ins and outs of it. I've been playing a ton of this new compilation, and I found that Apollo Justice is really good, and that there's a notable change from Apollo Justice to the next 2 games, which are on 3DS, which we can get into a little bit. But first, let's all just kind of give a little bit about our background on this series so everyone can know kind of where we stand. I've played every single one and almost all of the spin-offs, so I have the kind of the definitely a breadth of knowledge on this stuff, at least from what I remember. Kirk, how many of these games have you played?
I have played every single one of them. I think the only one that I maybe haven't finished is Spirit of Justice, which is the 2016 one. I think that was the second of the 3DS games, and I just have this sneaking suspicion. Is that the one where there's a whale that talks, that testifies?
No, the whale is DLC for one of the games.
Oh, okay.
Of course
I think
it
I maybe
is.
didn't play that. So there's a couple things I haven't played, but I've played everything over the years. I first played the very first Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney on my cousin's wife's DS. This was probably in like 2000. I mean, I guess in the mid 2000s. When did that come out? That came out in 2005.
Yeah, on the DS. It came out for the Game Boy in Japan only, and then the DS kind of remaster came here.
So it was on her DS, and it must have been like, 2006 or something then.
Wow.
And I remember I had no idea what it was, and I didn't have a DS. I was like borrowing, I don't even remember how I came to be borrowing someone's DS, and I started playing it. And I remember that very first case, there's a shocking murder, which is really surprising. And I was like so caught up in it and wanted to finish it. And then I had to give the DS back at the end of our visit.
Wow.
And at the time, I didn't know that Phoenix Wright was a phenomenon anywhere, like in Japan or at all, like that it was a big deal. I didn't know what it was. And then it was only many years later that I found, I think, all 3 of them for DS and played through them all and was like, oh yeah, I remember this. I remember playing this. And I've loved them ever since.
Yeah, they're fun to kind of mainline through. Before, Maddy, I want to get to you in a second, but let me just kind of set the scene for people who might not actually know much about these games. So they're essentially visual novels in that they are mostly reading, kind of combined with point-and-click adventures. And so the way they work is each game is split up into a series of cases, usually 4 or 6 of them, and each of them surrounds a murder. And you, as Phoenix Wright, or a couple of other attorneys who pop in later, your job is to defend someone who is accused of those murders and is almost always innocent of those murders.
And you have to solve the murder while you're already on trial, which is a little
You're basically a detective as well.
So the game is split up into 2 kind of sections. One is the investigation section, where you go around and talk to witnesses and look for clues in the crime scenes. That's the point and click adventure part. And then the other part is the courtroom sections, where you're unraveling the mystery on trial by interrogating witnesses, pointing out when they're lying, and using evidence to kind of show the contradictions in their cases. And what's really kind of makes this series so appealing to people is that it's just way off the wall with its humor, and it's kind of poking fun at the way that the justice system works in Japan, and the way that just the amount of kind of offbeat zany humor in this series
puns,
is just
wordplay.
Out of control. The puns are very funny too. Anyway, Maddy, what's your kind of level of expertise with the Ace Attorney series?
So I always knew about Ace Attorney and just kept meaning to play it and never got to it until 2019. So if people go back and they listen to Split Screen in that era, I think this was like Maddy had just joined the show era, and all I was doing was playing Ace Attorney. So pretty much every week I was just talking about how great all these early Ace Attorney games were.
It was your Dark Souls before Dark Souls.
It really was. I just played all of Ace Attorney. I also remember that was when I was early on in my relationship with Dina, and I was playing a lot of Ace Attorney, and she was watching it and being like, oh, wow, there's like a lot of text-based games. This was before Dina became the hardcore gamer she is today. And there's a lot of different kinds of games. And I feel like Ace Attorney isn't what the typical person might think of as being a kind of game that might exist and might be 20 years old and pretty well established, because it's a mystery solving game. There's no combat, there's no like twitch reflexes required in it. It's just looking at the clues that you have and trying to figure out when to present them, which is not always intuitive, but we can get into why and how it works and what the pitfalls are.
It is a mystery-solving game, and yet it's presented with the aesthetics of a fighting game, and that's part of what makes it so much fun.
Right.
Especially the courtroom scenes. You are trading blows with the prosecutor. There will often be sound effects that sound like punches and Hadoukens. I mean, they're almost doing combo moves at one another, and of course, this is a Capcom game, so it's almost got some Street Fighter crossover DNA. The music, of course, we should mention. The music is an incredible part of these games. Bing! Kirk here, just with some excerpts from the original Phoenix Wright soundtrack composed by Masakazu Sugimori and Akemi Kimura. Just incredible music throughout this entire series, and a huge part of the series identity to me, and I think to a lot of other people. So shout out to those composers. Okay, back to the show. Bing! The way that these court battles play out, and they really feel like battles between a defense attorney and a prosecutor. It is like each fact, each revelation, each turnabout in the game's parlance is like an uppercut or a spinning kick, and they're delivered in this very high-octane, frenetic way, even though usually they aren't hitting one another. I guess some of the prosecutors can get kind of violent.
Yeah, often they are. Each of the prosecutors in each game is a character in his own or her own right, and they all have weapons too.
Francisca and her whip, of course, a very memorable
which is a preposterous thing. There's kind of a fine line between the prosecutors attacking you with their weapons and the more serious murders that are conducted with weapons. But that's part of the charm. Maddy, You didn't say which games you played.
Right, that's true. Well, they all have similar names. So I guess the first three that were on Switch were just Ace Attorney, Justice for All, and Trials and Tribulations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I never did finish the one that is set in an alternate time period that we did talk about on Triple Click a while back.
The Great Ace
It's
Attorney.
not an alternate.
The past one.
It's not an alternate. It's just the past. Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it. Yeah, it's a distant relative of Phoenix Wright. Is that how they justified
like
it?
an ancestor.
Yeah. Of course. And even though he's kind of functionally exactly like Phoenix Wright, he just exists in the past. Sure. And then this is my first time playing these new ones now that they're on the Switch, and I'm having a great time and laughing out loud at a lot of it and just being like, I love puns. I simply love stupid puns, and I'm loving it. Like, it just has a really specific kind of wordplay that props to the people who translate these games, because obviously I'm playing them in English. I don't know how the puns work in the original Japanese. I can only assume they're just as clever, and that therefore the localization team has to try to come up with puns and wordplay that work just as well in English for... Usually it's characters from around the globe as well. Like in the first mystery in... what's the name of the first game I would be playing, Jason? Is it the Great Ace? What am I playing now?
It's just Ace Attorney.
Just Ace Attorney.
Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney.
Yeah, but I'm playing as Apollo Justice now, the new one.
You're talking about Apollo Justice, Ace Attorney. Just call him 4. Just like, it's easier to just be like Ace Attorney 1, Ace Attorney 2,
4.
Yeah, that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, there's a Russian character, and she keeps speaking in Russian, and I can only assume that she does that in Japanese as well, and they just integrate in Russian and her Russian accent but written in Japanese, and I find it very charming to think about that. And all the games are that way, with characters from around the world being
the localization
prosecuted.
is especially funny because yes, it's very well done in a lot of ways, and the puns and the writing, it's all quite well done, but there's also this kind of funny setting where they say they're in California, but there's so many clearly Japanese aspects of it. And this is always a meme about the series, that it's like, it's set in, people call it Japanifornia, because it's like, there was this comic that was always floating around where it's like Maya Fey, who's Phoenix Wright's right-hand woman, and they're talking about like eating hamburgers, and they're clearly eating ramen noodles, and it's like, eat your hamburger,
it's
Phoenix,
like the classic anime overdub thing where like the characters are eating dumplings and the voiceover says it's donuts. It's
exactly. It's so silly. And it's really to your point, Kirk, the kind of the back and forth is just such a fun, entertaining, dramatic kind of. It's also, these courtroom battles are such a kind of heightened, like soap opera-y, like kind of, you can imagine this all playing out on, I don't know, Anime Judge Judy or something like that, because
or like Harvey
you just
Birdman,
have these ridiculous
like
scenes, and every single witness is just lying under oath about everything, and your job is to just kind of figure out. Yeah, it's allowed within this world. I mean, there are a lot of things that just everybody gets away with in this law, which I think is part of the point.
But like, the judge will be like, okay, now that's enough. Stop lying and tell the truth now. And the character will be like, okay,
it's just
okay.
It's interesting.
So
it's
good.
kind of, it's very much, and I think Shu Takumi, who's the original series creator, I think he intended this as kind of a send up of the Japanese justice system, because it's all so heightened and it feels like such a parody in so many ways. And I think it's pretty clever in some of the things that they do, some of the themes they play around with. The Apollo Justice game, the 4th game, and the first game in this new trilogy that just came out, which, by the way, I recommend full-throatedly. That game has like introduces this concept of a jurist system and what that might look like, and that has some fun ideas. By the way, for people wondering, if you've never played these games, the first 3 games and the next 3 games are actually kind of, I won't say 100% self-contained, but like maybe 95% self-contained as trilogies in their own rights. So you could really, if you haven't played the first 3 games, I mean, you should, but if you don't want to, if you just want to play the new stuff, you can jump into Apollo Justice without missing too much context. Like, you'll have enough context to keep going, because the way that the games work is that the first 3 games all star Phoenix Wright, and then the creators, after those 3 games, especially Takumi, were like, we want to move on from Phoenix. Let's try to tell a new story. And so the 4th game largely stars Apollo Justice, who's this new character brought in just for this game. And then Apollo sticks around, and then they introduce a new attorney named Athena Sykes in Game 5.
Dual
and
Destinies,
then,
yeah,
so throughout Game 5 and Game 6, it's kind of the 3 of them alternating. And so their stories are kind of told throughout these 3 games in a way that is a lot more kind of contained to those 3. And then the first trilogy, is actually kind of self-contained as a trilogy and stories. It kind of leads in from 1 to 2 to 3. And it's a lot of like stuff on Miles Edgeworth, who's this kind of famous prosecutor and stuff like that. So in other words, this is actually a pretty good place to jump in, even if you haven't played the first 3 games.
Yeah, it is, though. I'm not sure I wouldn't just recommend people start at the beginning,
Yeah,
because there
they're all
isn't
on
like
Switch.
some significant, visual or gameplay upgrade that happens in the new trilogy. They all play pretty similarly.
There
true.
is a significant visual. It's interesting. So the first 4 games were on, the first 3 games I believe were on GBA and then ported to DS, and the 4th game was just on DS. But then the 5th and 6th game are on 3DS, and they actually add massive visual upgrades.
I'm not sure I agree that it's always an upgrade, though. I think that, Dual Destinies and Spirit of Justice both have 3D character models, and they have a lot more going on, but I really like how the first 3 games look. I think they look great. They're just 2D characters.
When I say upgrades, I guess I should say changes. I'm not implying any sort of improvement.
But 3D is better than 2D because it's a higher number, and we all know that.
Right.
That is true.
Because
That
it's
is true.
2003 and we all are console warriors. Yeah, I think that given that it's kind of just a change and a bit of a neutral one, and in some ways I think I actually prefer the look of the original games, I would kind of just say, just start with the first Phoenix Wright game. It starts with a bang, and it introduces you to the world and
It's
the rhythms.
great. It's just as funny.
Rewinding to something you were talking about earlier, Jason, with the sort of the weird cultural blurriness in this game where you're in California, but you're also not. I think playing this game as an American is particularly fun, or at least it was for me when I was starting out, because I didn't understand that this was a sort of perverse, cartoonish version of the Japanese justice system. And it bears very little resemblance to the American justice system, or really, I should say, though, as the son of a lawyer who does understand some things about the criminal justice system, most Americans understand our criminal justice system by watching Law and Order. We watch TV, and so we have like this TV justice system that we understand, where things work a certain way, witnesses are treated a certain way, you have to prove things beyond a reasonable doubt, jurors have to consider things. Like, there's just this whole rhythm that we understand from all the TV shows that we've watched, and playing this game throws that all out the window. Like, nothing goes in the order that it's supposed to go in, nothing makes sense. And because they set up every story and every conflict basically so that Phoenix, the defense attorney, is totally wrong-footed from the start. A lot of times you walk into court with like no idea what's going
Totally
on. And
unprepared.
like there's all this, like the prosecutor's like, haha, I have a ton of evidence that's just going to destroy you, and you're like,
I've never seen it. I don't know what it is.
I think about my cousin Vinny when he's
absurd.
like, the prosecutor says that he has all this evidence, and then Marissa Tomei is like, you can just make him show you that because of discovery. Like all of these things that we learn about just don't apply in the world of Phoenix, right? So it's very disorienting, and it puts you in Phoenix's shoes, or whoever the defense attorney is, who's always on the defensive and always recovering and improvising and kind of juggling their way toward eventually winning at the last minute by figuring something out and pulling it out in court.
It's also very expedited. Like, a murder will happen, and by 9 a.m. the next morning,
Yeah.
you'll be in trial defending.
Which is, I guess, why no one has any
your
of the
client.
evidence properly sorted, and
Right.
like sometimes even the prosecutor themselves will be like, oh, I just remembered I actually have a really detailed photograph that depicts something completely different, or like the other side of this key piece of evidence.
Yeah, I forgot to mention.
It's a very improvisational justice
It's like,
system
how
in
did
general.
that not come up until 4 acts into this case? Like, what is happening?
I should say also, the way we've described it, it sounds ridiculously silly and zany, but there's also kind of like an emotional core to a lot of it.
Definitely.
And it does explore some interesting themes. The way it's structured is that each game, even though it has kind of a few standalone cases, it winds up having this kind of big story thread that all ties together. And oftentimes it'll be like a bunch of kind of things that are hinting towards like one final case that is the culmination of everything. A lot of the more modern games, it'll be like an opening case where like something doesn't quite make sense and you don't understand something, and then you only find out the answer later on, like in the final case, and it all kind of ties together that way. But it does really explore this stuff in interesting ways, and the characters are very entertaining and also have a lot of emotional depth to them. There's a lot of interesting just kind of backstory behind Phoenix and his relationship with his friends or with Miles and with other people, and his high school or college girlfriend plays a major role in one of the games. And there's a lot of interesting stuff that it explores, even kind of in addition to or maybe below the zaniness of it all.
Yeah, they do a good job of stacking the narrative where a lot of times the clients that you'll have at the beginning of a game, of the series of cases that you're solving over the course of one of these games, the clients that you'll have will eventually become recurring characters in future cases, because you'll get them off. They'll have been accused of murder in case 2, and then in case 3, maybe it was like a restaurant owner in case 2. Then in case 3, it'll be like, oh, they were at this restaurant, and who should own the restaurant? And then their theme music starts playing, and that same character turns up. And this time, they're not accused of the crime. They're just, adding color and adding to the story. But because you know them so well from before, it has like a feeling of progression, so that by the end, when it's all pulling together, and sometimes there are revelations about characters that you didn't know, and there are twists and turns and things that become like really exciting, there's a feeling of a kind of symphonic storytelling going on by the end of each one that is really satisfying, without being overly. It doesn't feel like modern TV exactly. Like, it's very episodic, but it does feel satisfying in the end. Like, it all pulls together.
Yeah.
And it's good at averting expectations, which I think is smart.
Yeah, the mysteries are almost impossible to guess, almost because they're too silly to guess, but also because you don't have all the evidence. So it's a classic kind of opposite of a story where you have all the parts and you could conceivably get, what is that called? Like that style of narrative fiction where
they're structured as a how catch 'em, not a who done it,
exactly.
which we talked about, I think, with Poker Face, where you do usually see the murder take place before
Natasha
the whole,
Lyonne's character does, and then you get to watch her figure it out.
Case takes place.
Yeah, you often know who did it. You just don't know how it all came together. And even when you know who did it, or like you can easily guess who did it,
you don't know why
might still
or
be
how.
surprised.
Right.
Well, you might still be surprised by another aspect.
Right.
I just played a case last night where I think it was game 5, case 2, where like it's very clear who did it, but then you're surprised by some other cool twist.
Yeah,
right.
And it'll turn out that some other person that you didn't even know existed was there, or some other absurd like fourth person shows up. That's what I really like about it, is that it combines.
Gotcha,
yeah, exactly. Phoenix Wright would have had that case on lock. That is,
he probably would have figured it out.
He would have figured it out, I think.
Would've.
Yeah,
he definitely would have.
But that's part of what's fun, is that it kind of mixes the sense of solving the mystery yourself as the player with still having that sense of surprise, where new evidence is introduced by external factors that then complicates the narrative. But that's also what's hard about the game, which we haven't gotten to yet. And I immediately ran into this in the very first case of Ace Attorney Apollo Justice. That's what it's called. Where I could tell what piece of evidence was wrong, or what the discrepancy was, but I couldn't figure out which line of dialogue I needed to press the L button on in order to present the piece of conflicting evidence, which is kind of how every game works, as far as I know. As characters are talking, you can press a button in order to be like, hold on a second. Hold it is what you say. And there's even an animation on the screen of you saying that really loudly. And then you can present a clue from your little evidence locker that contradicts what they're saying. But sometimes they'll say a few sentences in a row that pertain to that piece of evidence, and you only have a certain number of chances to present evidence before you die. I mean, I don't know. I've never actually died in one of these games, so I don't know what happens. But you run out of energy, essentially, and I think there's a game over screen.
Yeah, I mean, what happens is the judge is like, I've seen enough, and he declares your client guilty, and then you get a game over screen. But you can just start again from
you just have to
wherever
go
you
back.
are, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it is a kind of a tension in those games for me. You get a certain number of, I believe it's exclamation points, that then get knocked away each time you make a mistake.
It's changed. It was changed to like a bar.
It's a progress bar in Apollo Justice, but it's the same idea.
And I would always just save the game right before doing that, and then just try a bunch of stuff. So there is a fair amount of brute force trial and error, or at least there can be for me, because you can wind up in situations too where the stakes keep getting higher as you progress through the game. And by the end, you might be in a trial where the judge is being so hard on you that you can't even press a witness for additional testimony because they just come up with some reason. They're like, no, you're not allowed to press this witness. So if you even press the witness, I'll penalize you. And you have to really choose your moments. And then you do wind up sometimes in those situations you described, Maddy, where you're like, okay, I know that it's to do with the point of view out of the window and the visibility. And like, I have this diagram and like, I know I'm supposed to present that, but maybe it's actually this other thing that's a photo of the window. And you're just not totally sure which piece of evidence to present. And it can be a little bit frustrating because you're losing life, basically.
Yeah,
and then just having to go back and reload pieces.
So to be clear about this, so what happened, so Kirk, what you're describing with the exclamation points in the original DS games, if you died, got the game over screen, ran out of your exclamation points, it would actually penalize you and you would have to like go back to a previous checkpoint or a previous save or something like that. In the new games and in the remastered versions of all of these games, it's a progress bar, and then also if you run out, you just can start from where you were. So there's no actual consequence for losing in
though there is the
remastered
consequence
games.
of having to go forward with a health bar that isn't full, and that really bothers me, so I'm still kind of safe.
Totally.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, I understand that.
But the broader point here is interesting, which is kind of that like the game's developers are thinking a certain way, have a certain kind of logic, and you have to kind of follow that logic. And most of the time, I don't know, tell me if you two disagree, but I feel like most of the time it makes sense. Occasionally there will be some finicky thing where it'll be like, yes, to your point, Maddy, where it's like, oh, it feels like it should be here, but actually it's here. Or one of the worst things is when you have a piece of evidence and you know exactly where it should go, but you haven't gotten to that point yet because the game isn't ready for it yet. And so like you actually have to wait a couple more
Phoenix
things.
Wright or Apollo Justice hasn't figured it out yet, or the witness hasn't yet said something that pertains to that piece of evidence, but you're already looking at a photo and being like, this is it, this is the discrepancy.
It's clearly this. That said, I mean, I think those moments are pretty rare, at least in my experience playing these games. I think most of the time it feels the flow is pretty good. It's pretty clear what you should be doing at any given point.
Surprisingly so, considering how hard it would be to design for something like that. I mean, you're basically just guessing how quickly you think someone's going to figure it out based on the clues that you've given them. And then also trying to time out the dialogue such that each climactic reveal happens in order. And then you look back at the picture again and you're like, wait, that's right. And it just, the fact that it works, I would say 90% of the time. And there's just that 10% where I'm like, I don't understand what I'm supposed to do here, is pretty miraculous.
Yeah, the storytelling cadence is really well done in these games, and the moments of eureka followed by nailing it, followed by watching the delight of, Phoenix finally triumphant in court. That happens more often than the times when I'm stuck. And they do such a good job. I mean, in those final showdown moments, there are in a lot of these games, you'll enter this, the really kick-ass musical start playing, and he'll enter this kind of Super Saiyan mode. Like it's like the whatever you want to call it, like motion blurred white and blue lines behind him as he's like getting ready to like fully destroy this person, and the animations that go along with that to bring it back to the fighting game thing. I mean, when you perform a fatality on someone on the stand and they get blasted out, maybe they've been hiding another like person under their coat or something, and finally they get completely destroyed in front of you and they're revealed, and their lies are revealed to the world. It's extremely satisfying, and it always tends to line up with that moment in your head where you realize like, okay, I've got it. I know exactly what happened. I've got you. And then you get to finally execute on that.
Yeah, you're reminding me that Phoenix Wright was in Marvel vs. Capcom 3. I had forgotten it until you were acting it out visibly for me that he's in a literal fighting game and just like throws pieces of paper at people and like shouts objection, and it actually does damage, and it's really fun and great.
Villains melting down is by far like one of the funniest things in the game and a highlight of everything, because they come up with these incredible final boss animations for each one. The other thing that this game is incredible at along the same lines is visual gags, and so there are so many moments where what you described, like someone's hiding something under their shirt, but also where like someone will just totally blow your mind with a visual reveal. I almost don't want to spoil it. I'll give an example of kind of a minor one. There are two in Apollo Justice that are truly incredible. One of them I won't mention, but the one I will mention is there's a musician in case 3, and he's kind of like looking at the camera like this, and his hair is kind of like spiky like this.
I remember
and then
this
at one point he turns to the side, and it's revealed that his hair is actually a massive, like it looks like a
It's like a
horn, like
cone,
going
yeah.
all the way out, like 10 feet in front of his head, and you're just like, what is going on here? So the visual gags are just fantastic.
Yeah, a lot
great.
of times it's a character who's immaculately put together and just impenetrable. And then when Phoenix finally reveals the truth about them, they'll just be disheveled and their hair will
Right,
be all
yeah.
messed up, and
They're
they'll
just exploding.
they'll have completely fallen apart. I think, am I remembering this correctly, that in the DS versions of the game you could shout objection into the DS microphone and that would perform
I
the
hope
objection
that's
in
true.
the game?
I have no
I believe
idea.
that is the case,
The
that you were
DS
supposed to be
did
shouting
have a lot
at
of
your
microphone
DS.
work
Yes.
back in the day.
Yeah, so the way it worked was you held down a button and you shouted objection or
Hell
hold
yeah.
it.
They should have kept that in. Why isn't that still in the Switch version?
Yeah, I guess there's not a microphone on this.
I don't think there's a microphone on the Switch, sadly.
Well, I guess I have to
it's
shout
really
it anyway,
unfortunate.
whether I'm heard or not.
So there's actually something that's kind of annoying about these games. They actually, with each game, with each kind of subsequent game, they started adding more and more mini games, in part to take advantage of the DS's touchscreen or the 3DS's touchscreen, and in part to just kind of switch up the gameplay and court, like in Ace Attorney 5 or in Apollo Justice, they introduced this idea of like perceiving a witness's kind of tells to see that they're lying. And you just have to kind of like use Apollo's magnifying glass type thing to kind of like spot what is going on while a witness makes a statement. But and in theory it's kind of cool, but in practice it's all just very tedious and makes you be like, all right, I don't know why I'm wasting my time with this. I wish I could just go to the next
Which is the
cross-examination.
one with the chains, where the chains appear across
The
people
psych
and they're
locks.
locked
Well, so
down.
that one, that
Yeah.
isn't really a mini game
That
because
sounds
it's kind of
very
it's just finding
Danganronpa-esque.
contradictions. No,
It is
it's
a
just
little.
the same as finding contradictions in
Right.
the court.
It is satisfying. Like there's an audio visual. It's satisfying to watch the chains break, I suppose. So,
No, that one
so-
I'm saying is fine. That's not what I'm talking
Yeah.
about, because that one is just you're doing the same gameplay that you do in the game. It's just like those are for the
Right,
investigation sequences rather than the courtroom.
Yeah, I get
what
you.
I'm talking about is like you have to do blood testing and like spray the screen, and you're just tapping at a screen. And it's the idea is like these DS gimmicks that do
Right.
not hold up well today.
I think, is it the final case? There's one of these games. Is it in Ace Attorney or is it in Trials and Tribulations, where the final case is way more involved than all the other ones?
Yeah, so what you're
And-
describing is in the
Go
first
ahead.
game. So in the first game,
Yeah.
it was originally released on the Game Boy Advance, and then they added an extra case for the DS version, so it's more involved because they added all those DS gimmicks.
Right. There's all this like dusting for fingerprints, and also
Yeah.
the story is like really elaborate, and it kind of goes to the heart of the justice system. Like it's a much bigger story than a lot of the earlier ones, and it does kind of stick
that's
out.
kind
Though I
of a
remember really
side
liking
story. And then so that stuff is carried on for Apollo Justice, which was the first like game made for the DS. And so what you're describing, the case you're describing at the end of Ace Attorney 1 isn't tied at all to the rest of the first
Right. It
trilogy.
comes out of nowhere.
But then it's tied into Apollo Justice because this lady, Emma Skye, who's the investigator, comes back
Right.
for game 4, and she's like, here's my luminol. Now you can tap the screen and do dusting and
right.
stuff.
Emma Skye, definitely the purveyor of all kinds of gimmicks. Like, here's
Exactly.
my fingerprint kit, and you can use the stylus to
and
dust for
it's just
fingerprints.
never good. None of that stuff is ever
I
enjoyable.
do like her as a
But,
character, though. She's funny.
Yeah, I mean, at one point you have to like make plaster footprints, and it's all just very dumb. But yeah, no, but like those things, those moments are kind of few and far between, and most of the time you're doing the good old fashioned investigating and moving around and detecting things. There are a few kind of big changes that happen in the 3DS versions. So you were describing some of the kind of 3D models before, and that's a part of it. There's some other big changes too. One is that the investigation scenes in the first 4 games are all just kind of 2D images, and you just kind of poke around. In the 3DS games, they're actually 3D scenes, and you can zoom the camera around as well. You can look at them from multiple angles to look for evidence and stuff like that. Also, a few kind of minor things like in the first few games, when you're moving between areas during the investigation scenes, you can't just go anywhere you want. You have to go like to one place, and then that's connected to another place, and you have to just kind of shuffle through screens. In the 3DS games, you can just kind of select from a big menu and go wherever you want.
Oh, that's
the
nice.
3DS games also add some kind of like mission briefs, like here's what you're supposed to be doing now, and other kind of quality of life type stuff. Just worth noting in case people are like curious to check them all out or curious about what the big differences are between all of these games.
Yeah, I still see it as just my de facto in my head what I compare all other solving mystery games to at this point. Maybe just because of when it came out, it's a relatively older game, and a lot of other mystery solving games are clearly inspired by it. But also just because when it works, it feels so great, and as though you really are solving the mystery or putting clues together along with the main character, which is what you always want in a game like that. And when you don't experience it, it's so frustrating. Like the gap between feeling like you're playing a game versus actually being in it mentally is so much stronger with a mystery game, I feel like, because you're actually doing the activity almost outside of the game. I feel like we talked about this a bit with Case of the Golden Idol, and how much you're just staring at the screen and not moving the mouse or anything. You're just looking at it and being like, all right, what do I do here? And that's great. Like, that's the best, because the game is just all taking place in your own mind. And that feeling is so wonderful when you actually figure out when you do need to grab your mouse again and move it and click on the correct thing to do next. But it just, I don't know, it all comes back to Ace Attorney. So if people are listening and they liked Case of the Golden Idol or any of those other games we mentioned, you'll probably like Ace Attorney. Even if it is kind of simple and silly, it's still fun. It's still got some core aspect
structurally
to it
a bit
works.
different, but
it's a lot more approachable. I think those games, you kind of have to use your brain in a way that you don't really have to use that much in Ace Attorney. I mean, for all of like the deduction and investigation and like presenting evidence to show
easier.
contradictions. I mean, it's so much easier. And in these games, there's an option to they call it consult, where you can get a hint from your assistant on the court stand, and they make it extremely approachable. In fact, these remaster games come with a mode that gets rid of all the puzzles.
Yeah.
It's called reader mode.
I saw
and so
that.
you can just play through the game without
like it's an
even
anime
having to do
and
that.
just watch it.
Yeah, exactly, which is a totally valid way to play too.
It's structured like individual bite-sized mysteries. Like, it's just, you're very in the moment. It is improvisational. Where a game like Golden Idol or Obra Dinn, that's like a meal. That's a big, huge event, like a mystery that you're having to put together on your own. You have to do a lot more work. In Phoenix Wright, it really is just like moment to moment. You're like Phoenix. You're living in the moment, and everyone's throwing everything at you, and you're like, okay, wait a minute.
Now.
Like, I've got two pieces of evidence, and something that guy said isn't true, and I just have to figure out what it is. You're just doing that over and over again, and it kind of scales up, but it never becomes as big and mental labor intensive as any of those proper mysteries. And yeah, I think we talked about this on our episode about mystery games. We had a pretty in-depth discussion about like these different types of mysteries and how they work differently.
A quick note on the spin-offs in this series before we call it for the week. I think it's worth noting there's a few spin-offs that have been released over the years. One is the great Ace Attorney, which Maddy, you mentioned before. We talked about this on Triple Click a couple of years ago when it came out.
They're great games.
It's a pair of games. It's a duology of games that are set in the past, set in the turn of the 19th century, with Sherlock Holmes and
Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, it's actually not Sherlock. That's right.
And yes, Phoenix Wright's distant ancestor. And those games, I actually think might be the best of the entire series.
They're really good.
They're quite good, especially number
those.
2. And number 2, it's one of those scenarios where like number 1 is setting up a lot of things, and number 2 just like knocks them all down. So those games are really worth checking out. Also now released for all the modern platforms. I played them all on Switch. There's Ace Attorney Investigations Miles Edgeworth, which is kind of a weird spin-off where you're playing as a prosecutor and the gameplay is a little bit different. There's more kind of walking a model around as Miles Edgeworth. The first game came out for, I believe, the DS or the 3DS, but the second game never came to the US. So that game, there was like a big fan translation. There's a theory or kind of a hope, I guess, that Capcom will now release an investigations compilation the way they've been compiling all these other games. So maybe that'll come in the future. And then the other one is called Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright, and it's kind of a spin-off that combines these two beloved
Persona
series.
X Fire Emblem kind of thing.
Yeah, I was actually really disappointed by this one because it's not actually like a crossover between the two. It's actually the way it's structured is that there are latent kind of gameplay, and then there's Phoenix Wright gameplay. It doesn't try to combine them, so it'll be like, here's the part where you go around and do puzzles. Here's the part where you're in court and just kind of doing Phoenix Wright stuff. It's not like finding some clever way to have like Layton doing like cross examinations and like solving puzzles that
like he's an expert witness
or
something.
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't do that. It's very separated, and that I thought was an unfortunate way to do things. But like if you're into these games, of course, it's always going to be fun. Really, the Great Ace Attorney are the ones to check out, and those, because they're set in such a different time period, are totally standalone, and so also a good entry point for the series.
And they incorporate the Herlock Sholmes, the deduction thing that is a very fun, different wrinkle to the gameplay. Those are always my favorite parts of those games, is when it's time for Holmes to do his deductions, and you get to recreate a sequence with him, and the two of you do this dance. Like it's so freaking good. And some of my favorite stuff in any Ace Attorney game.
Yes, incredibly good. Cool. Well, so the Apollo Justice trilogy is out this week. I
can't wait to play it again.
Through it. Yeah, it's a really good kind of relaxing, kind of chill on the couch and play a little bit in between things. It's a good kind of palate cleanser.
Have a giggle at some
more
silly jokes.
action-focused games. Yeah, and it's really cool. And like some of these games have their kind of weaker moments or weaker cases, but none of them are bad. They're all just baseline good, so it's hard to not recommend playing this trilogy. And I was actually surprised by how great Apollo Justice Ace Attorney 4 is, and how well it all ties together. And I'm sure I'll feel similarly about 5 and 6 as I play through more of them. All right, why don't we take a break, and then we'll be back with one more thing.
From the twisted minds that brought you the Adventure Zone, Balance and Amnesty and Graduation and Ethersea and Steeplechase and Ultraspace and all the other ones, the McElroy brothers and Dad are proud to reveal a bold vision for the future of actual play podcasting. It's called the Adventure Zone versus Dracula.
Yeah, we're gonna kill Dracula's ass. We're gonna attempt. We haven't recorded all of it yet. We will attempt to kill Dracula's ass. The Avengers Zone versus Dracula.
Yes, a season I will be running using the D&D 5th edition rule set, and there's 2 episodes out for you to listen to right now. We hope you will join us. Same bat time, same bat channel for more fun.
I see what you did there.
People say not to judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree.
Which is why here on Just the Zoo of Us, we judge them by so much more.
We rate animals out of 10 in the categories of effectiveness, ingenuity, and aesthetics, taking into consideration each animal's true strengths, like a pigeon's ability to tell a Monet from a Picasso, or a polar bear's ability to play basketball.
Guest experts like biologists, ecologists, and more join us to share their unique insight into the animal's world.
Listen with friends and family of all ages on MaximumFun.org or wherever you get podcasts.
And we are back. Kirk, Maddy, it is time for one more thing. Kirk, start us off.
So I watched a movie with my D&D group that I absolutely loved, and I just wanted to recommend it on the show. And that movie is Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves, which came out last year. And I knew was good. Everyone's talked about how great it is. We were really just waiting to get as many of us together to watch a movie as we could, because I thought it would be a fun thing to watch with my D&D group. And it turns out it really is. But it's also just a great movie. I'm sure a lot of our listeners have already seen it, but anyone who played Baldur's Gate and liked it has to see this movie. Like, it's so funny how much it has in common with Baldur's Gate and how often you'll see things from the world of D&D and just how much fun it is if you've ever played D&D. This movie is directed by Jonathan Goldstein and John Francis Daley, who I guess I knew them as having written Spider-Man Homecoming, but they're kind of just pros in Hollywood. They've written a lot of movies together and worked together for a while. It stars Chris Pine and Michelle Rodriguez. They're kind of the two leads. Chris Pine is a bard and Michelle Rodriguez is a barbarian. And it's a very, it's tongue-in-cheek in a way. It's a little bit self-aware, but it never breaks the fourth wall. There's never a moment where,
you see the players playing as them at the
I was
table.
wondering if it was going to be that kind of a movie, and it's not. And it also, never makes fun of the fact that it's Dungeons and Dragons. It's a little like The Princess Bride, but even, I guess more like the movie than the book, The Princess Bride. It's never making fun of the fact that it's taking place within this rule set in this world that we all understand, even though there will be things like, he'll say, well, we've got about 6 hours, so I'm going to take a rest. And if you play D&D, you're like, oh, a short rest. Okay, cool. You kind of know how that works. Or you can see there will be sequences where they'll mention some, ancient god, and then two of the characters will be like, oh, I know that name, and because they just pass a history check, and they'll you can tell kind of when the checks are happening if you've played D&D, but if you haven't, it's just a fun fantasy caper, and it winds up being very much like assemble a party, and we have to go perform a heist. Hugh Grant is in this movie as the villain, and he is really wonderful. It has a bunch of just really enjoyable side characters and bits from start to finish. So yeah, it's basically the story of a group of adventurers who need to break into a certain vault. There are all kinds of, lore ramifications and characters from around the world of D&D sort of flitting in and out. And the more familiar you are with all of that, the kind of more fun the Easter eggs are. But really, it's just very funny. I mean, Chris Pine is extremely charming. Michelle Rodriguez is so great. She plays the heavy so well. And I just hadn't seen her in anything in a while, so she's really good. And I can't recommend it enough. Like I said, I'm sure a lot of our listeners have seen it. But if you play D&D or if you played Baldur's Gate, you have to watch it. It's made with that in mind. It's, it's very aware. It takes place in Neverwinter. They're constantly talking about, the Sword Coast and Baldur's Gate and all the, Waterdeep, all the places that are referenced in the games and in the most kind of popular D&D media. I saw that this movie didn't do well, which is too bad. I'm kind of not surprised. Speaking of names, I think the name is pretty weak. I think putting Dungeons and Dragons in the title has the baggage of that earlier Dungeons and Dragons movie, which I never saw, but I think was apparently pretty mediocre. I think it was just called Dungeons and Dragons. And also Honor Among Thieves is just a kind of blah title.
It's
basically the title of Uncharted 2.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like an Uncharted game. Yeah,
it is. That's just Among Thieves. So it's better because it has an extra word.
But
it's just not it's not a great title, especially given that it's so fun. I mean, anyone who likes movies like Stardust or The Princess Bride, those kind of really light, high fantasy, funny movies with really charismatic, charming leads would love this movie. I mean, I would watch it again in a second. So I really wholeheartedly recommend it. And anyone out there who is like, oh, I don't know, that looks kind of mid. It's not. It's a very good movie. It's very, very funny. And I think anyone listening to this would enjoy it. So a wholehearted recommendation for that from me. And if you have a D&D group, watch it together. It's fun to watch with your group.
Cool.
Maddy, what's your one more thing?
Mine is also a movie, but it's a documentary that Dina recommended we watch after we finished the Barbie movie. And I'm going to recommend it because I figure more people are probably seeing that movie because it's Oscars season and I don't know. Anyway, it's called Tiny Shoulders, Rethinking Barbie. And it came out in 2018. And I think Dina watched it back then, but we rewatched it. And it's a great documentary. And I can't prove that Greta Gerwig watched it before she wrote the movie, but I am very strongly suspicious that she did. Not a bad thing at all. So the plot of the documentary, and it does kind of have a plot, is that it's following all these people who work at Mattel while they were doing the kind of 2016 era redesign of Barbie's body type. And specifically, they came out with 3 different body types for Barbie in that time, and they did a huge Time magazine splash cover, and they talked to a reporter, and only that reporter got to hear about it. Although, of course, also these documentarians who were talking to the people making the new dolls also got in on it at the time. So it's kind of a journalism story, but it's from the other side, because the whole time the Mattel employees are like terrified of what they call her a feminist reporter too. They're like so scared of what she's going to write, and they're like, what's her headline going to be? And people are going to drag us on Twitter. It's like very 2016 kind of vibes, but it's also fascinating. They get a lot of talking heads of just, like Gloria Steinem and Roxane Gay, like people just talk about the history of Barbie and feminism, and that's all amazing. But the best part to me, and the part that reminds me of the Barbie movie, is just the corporate parts. Like, they just have staff meetings where the people who work at Mattel are just sitting around a table arguing about what Barbie's body type should be. And that's like, you always want to be a fly on the wall for that conversation. And there's this one woman who's a young woman, and she's like the conservative one. Like, I don't know how else to describe her, so apologies to this woman.
In the sense that she wants to retain the old
That's right.
Barbie
And she
proportions?
describes Barbie's body as aspirational at one point, and you can like see her coworkers cringing and being like, other people don't feel that way about her. And like, they're literally arguing with one another about the politics of this doll, and like multiple people are like, if I could do anything with Barbie, it would be to change her body type. And it's fascinating. And they do eventually get there. Like, we maybe people don't know if they aren't into children's toys, but like, they do have a curvy Barbie now. But it's such a like stressful road to get there. And it's also just kind of personally fascinating to me to see all these Mattel employees debating, because that's also weirdly a part of the Barbie movie. And so many of the things they literally say in the movie just reminded me of the stuff that Greta Gerwig's movie is making fun of in a good way. So if you watch the movie Barbie and you're like, it's kind of fun and frothy, and I want something that feels a little more real, Tiny Shoulders Rethinking Barbie is that, because it's about actual people who make the doll. And it's really cool. It's a really good movie. We watched it on Hulu, and I recommend it.
Nice. Yeah, I'll watch it. That sounds great.
Do they talk to the journalist for her perspective?
They do.
Also?
She's in the movie just a little tiny bit. And her story's great. I actually read it before I went to the Barbie movie as part of my research. It's super long, and it's got a ton of great details in it. And I recommend that too.
Does the Chiron under her name introduce her as feminist journalist?
Reporter? Yeah, no, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Funny. That would be like a satire documentary. Like, feminist journalist.
Yeah.
So my one more thing was a video game called Palworld that has kind of exploded over the last week.
I also played it for a couple hours for what it's worth. So
last I checked it sold something like 40 billion copies in 24 hours.
Like that, yeah.
So this game, people have kind of described it as Pokemon with guns, because it's got a bunch of different fun critters that can shoot each other and be enslaved and eat each other and stuff. But really, it's best described as Ark Survival Evolved, or kind of like any kind of survival game with Pokemon. Like, so you can go around. So when you start, you're kind of dropped into this world, and that is kind of seems to be procedurally generated, I believe, and it's kind of generic. And you are told to go and create a crafting table, and then build a base, and so on and so forth. And then it kind of falls into a lot of the trappings that you've seen in a lot of survival games, where you're going around and harvesting stone and wood and using them to construct things. And then the big gimmick is that you go around and you can craft your kind of Pokeballs and throw them at the pals that you see in the wilderness to recruit them and bring them to your base, where you put them to work and give them food and shelter and stuff like that. So yeah, this game is blown up for all sorts of reasons. It's become a lightning rod for controversy for other reasons. People have accused it of all sorts of things. I've seen people say that kind of unfoundedly that it was made by AI, because the creators said they were interested in AI and have made a game involving AI in the past. I've seen a lot of people claiming that it rips off Pokemon, whether because the designs are similar or because the modeling is similar. People have posted videos of like the mesh models that appear to be similar. I'm not going to get into any of that stuff without doing more reporting on my own, but I can describe what it's like, which is it's surprisingly unjanky. Like it feels good to play, and I can see why it's so popular. It's not like my type of game. I'm not really into survival games, but the few hours that I played of it, I could feel that kind of addictive loop and see why so many people are so into it, because it's got just really solid fundamentals. You have this massive technology tree that you are gradually upgrading as you go and you do quests and stuff, and that technology tree contains all sorts of cool weapons and gear and buildings you can construct and things that will make it so you can upgrade your base and get more pals into your base and then go and use them in cool ways to go beat bosses and do other things out in the world. The game is in early access, so it's not even close to complete, and from what I gather, they have a whole big roadmap plan. These developers have features that they want to add in the future, like raids and stuff like that. But even now, there's a lot of stuff in it. You can do everything from like getting bows and arrows to Gatling guns, and like there's one Pokemon thing, Pal, that is like a flame fox that you can build a backpack and then use them as a flamethrower. So it's got that kind of meme ability that is perfect for like Twitch and TikTok. And so you can see why, once you start playing, it's very obvious why this game exploded and has become as popular as it is. It's like very much like designed for virality. And I think if I were into this type of game, like if I were more of like a survival, like a Minecrafty, Valheim-y person, I would be like, wow, this is awesome. I want to keep playing this because it's very well made from what I've seen so far, and like runs well and feels good in general. There's a paraglider that you can get, and there's a bow and arrow, and there's all sorts of kind of mechanics that they've thrown into this thing. But the discourse surrounding it has become so crazy and almost poisonous that it's like you can't it's difficult to know what to make of it. I'm sure there will be stories coming out in the future. The developers are based in Japan, which makes it a little difficult for Western journalists to get a hold of them and try to figure out what their side of the story on a variety of things. They have, of course, denied any sort of wrongdoing or copying from Pokemon or anything like that. And my colleague Cecilia at Bloomberg, our former colleague, who's now my current colleague, spoke to a bunch of lawyers for a Bloomberg article that we'll link in the show notes, and they essentially said, yeah, there's no legal case here or anything like that. So as far as legal wrongdoing, I don't know, it seems like it would be a tough battle to fight. But the game is interesting. I don't know if I would recommend it necessarily, because again, it's not my cup of tea, but I think I can certainly see why it got so popular.
Yeah, I can see why too. I have some early complaints, especially having played Lego Fortnite so recently. And it's funny to make that comparison because Lego Fortnite is so against violence. And even though both games have cute little sheeps that you collect wool from in them, Palworld has you beating the sheep to near death almost immediately, because that's just kind of part of the edgy world of Palworld, is that you beat these animals and they make adorable noises of pain before you kidnap them and make them build Gatling guns for you. And Lego Fortnite, you just collect the wool and you never kill anybody. But it does have a really similar gameplay loop early on where you're just feeling like, man, I just can't get enough pieces of wood. What the heck? I need 20 pieces of wood. And you just do that for like 6 hours of your life. And then eventually you have more wood than you know what to do with. And I think the real boon is if you have friends who are playing, and any survival game, no matter how boring or janky or those things, can be fun if you have 5 people playing it with you.
Yeah, 100%.
That's enough.
It seems like a very different experience when you're playing with other people, and I was playing alone, so very for sure. Different type of thing. The other thing I'll say is that, like, even though it's got the guns and the violence and the what you described as edgy, it is not like gory or lurid at all. There's no blood. There's no, like, even when you kill one of these pals, they just kind of like roll around in like a kind of cartoony, like they have X's on their eyes and stuff like that. So you're not really it's not really a game where like maybe if I play further I'll like feel differently, but from what I've seen so far, it's not something that I would be like, oh my god, keep this out of the hands of children or something like that. It's just kind of like a game with guns and Pokemon that is kind of cartoonishly violent in that sense. But again, I haven't seen everything the game has to offer, so there might be worse stuff ahead. All right, why don't we say goodbye for this week? Kirk, Maddy, see you both next week.
Yeah, see you next week.
Bye.
Triple Click is produced by Jason Schreier, Maddy Myers, and me, Kirk Hamilton. I edit and mix the show and also wrote our theme music. Our show art is by Tom DJ. Some of the games and products we talked about on this episode may have been sent to us for free for review consideration. You can find a link to our ethics policy in the show notes. Triple Click is a proud member of the Maximum Fun Podcast Network, and if you like our show, we hope you'll consider supporting us by becoming a member at MaximumFun.org/join. Find us on Twitter at TripleClickPod, send email to tripleclick@MaximumFun.org, and find a link to our Discord in the show notes. Thanks for listening. See you next time.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows.
Supported
directly
by you.